これ普通に日本人やってわからない人はわかんないと思うよ。
Welcome to the lazyfluency podcast, where we have casual conversations between English and Japanese so that you can learn from and with us along the way. I'm Joey.
And I'm Miami.
And the topic of the day is language tests. Before we get into that, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and or drop a review with the platform you're listening on. And if you feel so inclined, support us on Ko-Fi. We appreciate the support. And with that out of the way, language tests. The JLPT, the Kanji Kente, and the TOEIC. Although I doubt many learners begin learning languages to pass a test, the importance and status of these tests seems to be increasing year over year, and I realized that we've never actually talked about them, despite referencing so many of these tests all the time. To be clear, we're both talking about English and Japanese tests, although my perspective primarily has been around, Japanese tests. Are they important to take? What do they actually represent and all those various different things? Aimi, what is your experience? You can start it with English tests. And I'm actually curious after that, I mentioned the kanji kente, but that's actually intended for Japanese speakers, yet I don't know any native Japanese speaker, as in we're also going to put the qualifications of they're not like mixed or anything, who's taken the kanji kente. So I'm actually wondering, what is the purpose of that?
漢字検定はね、私は個人的に取ってないんだけど、でもなんか、中学校、高校行った時に、なんか学校単位で申し込むっていうのがあって、で、別に強制ではないんだけど、まあ大体受けてたね、そこで。で、みんな何かしら確か持ってて。で、まあ受ける意味っていうのは、まあそんな深い意味はないんだけど、まあ、ある程度の何級とか、まあ1級2級とか持ってれば、それを履歴書に書いて、こういう資格があるんだっていうのがわかるだけで、そんなに別に、大きく何かを意味するものではない気がする。
Yeah, I was looking online and it said that primarily it was used for you can put it on interviews or it looks good on some applications, but I don't really know how much of that actually is true. And when I was looking at it, I don't know why EQ even exists as a requirement. I'm looking into it and to be clear, so we have, we'll talk about the JLPT in a second, but if you were to compare the Kente to the JLPT is very different. It's focused on kanji knowledge, and I believe it involves also knowing stroke order, and is very heavy in writing. I don't know if you actually have to write paragraphs or anything, but I know you do need to know how to write kanji very well. And Jun Nikyu, which I would say is close to the EQ for N1, is 1,951 characters required to know. And then Nikyu is 2,136, but then there's a huge jump. So, and to be clear for those who you might be thinking, 2,000, that's not that bad or whatever. And when you say that in Japanese, that means knowing all the readings, knowing all the usage in different words and stuff like that. So it's quite a lot. But then you go to Jun EQ, which is a small jump actually. It goes up to 3,000, which is what you're expected to know. But then EQ is 6,000, which I think if anyone's watched my kanji video, knowing that many thoroughly in all the different usages is what Japanese professors are expected to know. And so I'm curious, how many do you think, this is 2022 data I have, how many people do you think took the EQ, kanji kente, and how many people do you think passed in Japan?
漢字
EQ。
そもそも一般人そんなね、取るイメージなくて、そういうのを取る人って大体資格取るマニアとかいるじゃん。何かしら資格を持っていればいいじゃんって考えてる人たちが取ったりとか、あとそれこそ漢字が大好きで取る人とか、あと、クイズ番組とかでよく漢字得意ですって言ってる人が、漢字1級持ってますみたいな。そういう人たちが取るもので、別に一般人は多分、普段取るものではないと思うんだけど。
So how many, we have Jukensha and we have the Gokaksha. I'm looking at them right now. Well, how many people do you think took the EQ, the highest level of the kanji kente in 2022?
人数的ってこと？人数、何人と、受ける資格してる、受験してるか。
I'm curious. I want your perspective. Especially listeners, have an idea in your head.
わかんないな。でもなんだろうね。規模的に、わかんない。 1年間でってこと？
Yeah, they how many people took it? I mean, I have like I don't know if it's like once a year. I can't remember how frequent it is.
わかんなすぎでしょ。1万
You have no guess? You have no... Okay,
1万人
847 took the test. So 847, less than 1,000 people in all of Japan. So very, very small. And then only 81 passed. So that's 9.6%. The 合格率 9.6%. So I don't like it's
なんかさ、
insane.
違う、その中にはさ、違うよ。なんか、面白半分でさ、なんていうの？記念でテスト受ける人もいるんじゃない？どれだけ難しいかとかさ、なんか、勉強しないで行く人も中には。
There's only 800 people. That's not that much. I'm pretty sure the people who are taking the EQ are, you know, very skilled. So like having a 10%, less than 10%, like, you know, success rate on that is crazy. But before we talk too much about the Kente, because if you're wondering if you should take the Kente, I don't know, if you're like really into Japanese and you love kanji, then sure. But in terms of practical reasons, I don't really think there's any benefit. But I mean, before I talk about the JLPT, I want to hear about your experience with toeic and how it actually affects, you know, language learning. And do Japanese people need to take it? And like, what benefits do they get?
なんか、そもそも日本人にとっての、英語の、能力を試すテストが、いろいろあって、で、一番有名なのは多分、TOEFL、TOEIC、英検っていうやつだと思う。有名どころで言うとね。で、一番最初に私が取ったのは英検ってやつで、もうそれは本当になんか、もう小学生から、おじいちゃんおばあちゃんまで、なんか結構、その年齢で、有名っていうかみんな取ってるもので、で、英検は確かうちの学校はなんか強制的に受けさせられたのね。で、英検準1、
Is that like every year or how frequent?
Every year. それはちょっと覚えてないんだけど、確か中学2年とかでなんかみんな受けましょうみたいな感じなんだよね。でもその時に私はなんか半強制だったから別になんかいいかなと思って受けてないんだよ。で、中3ぐらいの時に、なんか、初めはなんかみんな5級から受けるのね、確か。なんか5級ってもうほぼなんか ABC とか多分そんな感じなんだけど。で、いや、それ受けても意味ないなと思って、次の年になんか自分で、12級から受けたんかな？で、受かって、で、次2級受けて、受かって、確か高1か高2ぐらいの時に準1級受けて受かったのね。で、その時全然
what benefits is this all? Because as we talked about, I mean, I don't know if we've had it in actually, I don't know if we've had an episode directly about English skills in Japan, but I think everybody would know not very high. What level, like, you know, is it just for the application process basically? Or also does TOEIC have a speaking component, by the way?
TOEIC は、ない。スピーキングがない。なんか、TOEIC ちょっと待って、TOEIC L&R っていうのがあって、これ多分リスニングとリーディングかな？そうね。だから喋るのはないんだよ。でも、英検は、3級以上は、二次面接で、喋るのがあるのね。
Mm-hmm.
でも TOEIC でも S&W っていう、スピーキングとライティングかな？そう。を取れば、スピーキングとライティングのテストはできる感じかな。で、TOEFL も、スピーキングはなかった。待ってね。違うわ。TOEFL IBT っていうのが、リーディング、リスニング、スピーキング、ライティング全部あって、で、私が今の大学でなんかみんな強制的に受けさせられたのは TOEFL IT なんとかってやつ、ITB かなわかんないけど。それは、リーディングとリスニングだけだった。から取るものによって全然、なんだろう。スピーキングとかライティングあるないなの、なんか違いがあって。で、
And do you feel like, yes, go ahead.
何?
No, I was saying, and like, obviously I don't think a lot of the Japanese population is necessarily very passionate about learning English, like many learners are about Japanese. So do you feel like I've heard Japanese people complain, and they're like, our English is always, it's always being taught for a test. And people will say this in a negative light. But personally speaking, for the vast majority of Japanese people, like vast majority, I feel like Japanese people only care about learning English because there is a test.
まあそうね、なんか実質、なんだろう、その英文化とかさ、なんかすごく英語が好きな人以外に関しては、なんか仕事で必要だあったりとか、なんかレジュメでよく見えるとか、あと、その、
Wait, when would it ever be required for a job? Let's be clear here. I don't think it's ever required for a job.
例えば、なんだろう、外資系の、まあ会社とかだったり、あと、なんか、会社に、まあ海外支部があるとか、あと、そうだね。でもさ、会社側もさ、なんかいろんな、なんていうの、スキルがあった人を取りたいじゃん、多分。だから、それを、まあ、自分ができますよっていうアピールをするために、まあ、TOEIC900 何点とか、英検1級、準1級とか、なんかそういうのを書いて、英語力をアピールすると。で、中にはなんか本当に IELTS とかは、確かなんか、アメリカは違うんだけど、イギリスとかオーストラリアとかの、なんか、海外の大学の留学するのに、なんか必要っていうか、取らないといけなくて、多分永住権、わかんないけど、なんか永住するのにも必要なんかな。そう。
I mean, I wouldn't know about those specifically, but this discussion kind of reminded me of, I know you're not watching it, but many people are, and I started watching it recently called Shogun, which is like a current airing show right now. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but anything I think major. But there's a person in the show who translates, a Japanese person who translates what should be Portuguese, but they're speaking English. And she speaks extremely good, extremely like good English, and also very good like archaic Japanese. And the thing I want to kind of tie this into and why it came to my head is with all these different tests. And you were saying like, oh, well, there's this thing that you might end up using, or maybe if you're going to be in a gaishike, you might be using English. As someone who like went to like some of the fairs that were like both English and Japanese, in the United States, as well as like was interested at one point in working in like a European company in Japan. I personally don't believe there like ever really a situation where you need to learn English unless you're straight up just moving to another country. But the only reason that I got reminded of Shogun is basically the only people I've ever met in my life, well, except for you, you're an exception. You're literally the only exception. So shout out to Ayami, everybody, who like can speak English and has a good English pronunciation, are Japanese people who are culturally or ethnically, or what do you call it? They basically were raised in some other country. And so I looked up this asterisk as well for Shogun. I'm like, yeah, this person, no, I don't believe it. They didn't study, like they're definitely born. And I checked and they're like, I think New Zealand, like half New Zealand and like half Japanese. And in my head though, it was immersion breaking because I was like, there was never somebody who, wasn't, Kikoku Shijo, who just encountered English or Portuguese or whatever during their early 20s and is speaking impeccable English or Portuguese. Like the person starts doing quotes being like all these poetic quotes and be like, this is the Japanese way. Here's a frog. I'm like, bro, that never happened. But anyways, I just thought, if you know, maybe you'll know what I'm talking about. I just thought it was so funny. I'm like, yeah, but I am... So good.
どの言語にもいるんじゃない？なんかある言語でさ、すごくさ、できてる人って大体何かしらのバックグラウンドがあったりとかさ、ね。
Well, I guess what I'm saying is for Japanese, the background is always being a native speaker to some degree.
何？日本人が英語できる人ってこと？
Yes. Or my situation, right? Where like, it'd come extremely weird if I was bragging, or not even saying bragging, but like if people were impressed that I can speak English, even though like, I think I told you, or maybe I never mentioned it. One of the reasons I'm like moved to the US, when I was 8 was because I stopped being I could communicate, at least I thought, to my father, but my father, thought that he was losing his ability to communicate with me because because of Spanish. And so one of the reasons we moved to the US. And so I had to actually go through speech classes. And I remember specifically, I have some like semi-traumatic memories in my head from saying the word girl. I used to say it like whirl or something like that. And I couldn't pronounce the R's. And I remember, in a speech class, they're like, girl. And I had to say it over and over again. I don't know what this had to do with. Oh yeah, that's right. My point is that I wouldn't consider myself someone who is a non-native speaker of English, if that makes sense.
まあ、そうね、なるほどね。だからそういう人が、そういう、ジョイみたいなタイプの日本人ははいるんだよ。その、英語めちゃめちゃできる人っていうのは、だいたい、ジョイみたいに、まあ、8歳とかなんとか、まあ、海外行ったりとか、もう生まれは、その、どっか違う国で、大人になってから日本帰ってきましたとか、なんかそういう環境にいた人っていうのは割と多いね。
Yeah. Oh, I do want to talk about...
あれなんだよ。
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
日本に行ってさ、そういう環境がないからさ、英語をなんか周りで日常的に使ってる環境っていうのはそのインターナショナルスクール以外ないから、そういうとこ行かないとね、できないんだよ。
I am actually curious about... That's probably a whole episode topic in itself. I really am curious about international schools, especially because I've heard about them, but I want to know what they're more like. Okay, but I do want to talk about, obviously, JLPT. Probably many of you listening to this are probably like, when are you guys talking about the JLPT? I want to know if I should say the JLPT. So, JLPT, the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, most popular test, for foreigners learning Japanese. There are some other ones. I know there's like a business test. I can't remember the name. Is it Yeah, there's one related to that. And although it is like a test, the standard is like the JLPT. For those who don't know, somehow, there are 5 levels. 5 is the lowest level. 1 is the highest. 5, actually, I'll just here if it's demonstrated. I like generally know it off the top of my head in terms of the general levels, but here, 5 is the most basic level of Japanese, understanding basic Japanese, basic sentences. 4, slightly more advanced. Focusing on common daily interactions. 3, intermediate level. This is more advanced than the previous ones and is basically more natural, almost full native speed. Then you have N2, pre-advanced level. Things get more complicated. Basically, you have to understand more narratives. And then 1, you have to be able to understand all different types of Japanese and logic complexity and comprehend them all. That's like is on paper.
これ、スピーキングないんでしょ?
No, there's no speaking and there's no what's it called? There's no speaking and there's no writing on N1. And this is one of and those 2 reasons, plus just maybe other reasons, but it being like the the most established test and one of the most well known has kind of made because I just was getting your opinion about like what the Japanese like experience with TOEIC is, which it sounds like it might be similar to the Japanese, but there's something I guess very different about Japanese learners, which is like a lot of Japanese learners aren't learning for some job reason. I mean, other than the fact they want to be in Japan, they're learning because they're passionate about Japan, which is why I feel it's very weird from my perspective that the N1 or just the JLPT test in general has super become like a status or like a speed running goal for many Japanese people. It's like, how effective is your method of learning? Well, how fast were you able to get to N1? And I find this especially funny because there's no speaking or writing component of the N1. And so you can get people of all different levels doing the N1. And just so you know, guys, and this isn't neither here nor there. Like I had,
なんか、わかる。なるほどね。なんかさ、これってさ、なんか暗記とか回しとけばさ、絶対
Yeah, there are all these like, more, super concentrated approaches towards, their vocab and basically treating every other thing that's not geared towards, speeding you as quickly to this goal that like once you achieve it, I don't know what you're expecting to happen because here's the thing, even if you hypothetically, let's say you pass the N1 this very cool, impressive time. And if you're doing it for a job related reason, then you're going to be expected to be able to write and speak Japanese. I mean, maybe write, but in most positions that is still relevant if you actually want to use it at the same level that you can do your other skills. So if you speed rust it for the degree to assume that you can get a job with it, I don't know who you're fooling. The second thing is if you even achieve, like N1, I will tell you from personal experience, that is just, I mean, like everybody, has their own journey learning and different goals. And I don't want to trivialize it because I'm like very, like, I remember how much like joy I had when I, completed the goal, like passing the N1, and that was nice. If you're someone who like, always trying to improve their Japanese, you will always feel like there's more to do and more to improve. And like to me now, when I'm like listening, reading, speaking Japanese, I'm like, oh man, I barely knew anything when I passed the N1 is how I feel about it now. And to be clear, this doesn't mean like I barely passed the N1. I was pretty comfortable and I felt comfortable doing it. And I was like, yeah, this felt good. But the more you learn, the more you realize, the more you don't know. So even more so, the more Japanese I learn, the more I'm like, the whole putting this arbitrary goal as like you have peaked in the Japanese and you're flying and like, and now you can like look at all the gaming. I don't know why my Japanese came to my head first, like the English, the scum. Basically, you can look at all the other learners and be like I am now the Japanese learning god. I don't know. It's a very weird thing to me. Maybe you're used to it for English, but for Japanese, it comes off to me so weird because I think at the end of the day, most people want to learn. Well, actually, not. I think. Sorry. According to what I've seen, survey data, about it's like 75% of people who learn Japanese, one of their reasons for doing it is anime, which we kind of talked about at the end of last section. But
it is what?
Anime. Anime. Literally, anime is like 75% of learners. Yeah. Have an interest. So just so you know, you're in the majority. If you're an anime learner, let's not let them shame us. You are in the majority.
今ちょうどさ、N1 のさ、なんか問題、過去問わかんないけど、なんか見てんだけど、意外とって言うともおかしいけど、なんか普通に難しい気がする。なんか、言葉を埋めたりとかね、私の主張は単なる括弧ではなく確たる証拠に基づいてるで、なんか、括弧に入るものを選べとかね。なんか、これ普通に日本人やってわからない人はわかんないと思うよ。
No, I mean, I think there's grammar that's less common, but any Japanese, like actual native speaker, trust me, you could clear it
あれよ。
trivially.
ちょっとそこら辺、ほつき歩いてる渋谷のギャルとか多分わかんないよ。
Nah, trust me, they can do it. Trust me, they like. I
接続詞とかさ、あと、特に私もちょっっとこれ怪しい。
part of it is like the way that the test is structured, to be clear. Like there's some weird like tricky structures with the test. Sorry, go ahead.
あれだよ。長い文章あるじゃん。なんか現代文みたいな、普通の日本の国語の、で出てくるような、やつで、なんか長い文章私すごく苦手でさ、なんか、これは reading comprehension なんだと思うけど、これをなんか例えば、
trust me, you have no...
ねえねえ、時間以内、なんか例えば30秒で読んで、答えなさいとか、なんか、時間制限があったらきつい気がする。
No, there is a 時間制限, but when you're looking at it now, I can see why you might think it is, and I'm not saying, to be clear, like, obviously there was a point in time where I felt, this was like a Herculean task, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not trivializing anybody's experience with Japanese, but what I'm saying is, when... Like, and obviously there are like, unusual grammars and like some of the kanji you might not like I mean, all the kanji shows up, but it might not be the most frequent thing. But my point is like, for example, just because I passed, like when I passed the N1, it didn't mean I could trivially pick up like any novel and read it comfortably, and I feel like a lot of people, if you're wondering, might think that that'd be the case when you pass the one even clearly. It took me a while before that was the case. And then even still then, as I moved up to different types of literature, more and more complex, or went from listening to different types of stuff to, very fast, like news, political commentary, other stuff like that. That's another level above that. And it took like much longer to feel like I could be comfortable listening to that. And even still, like, with Shogun, although to be clear, Shogun is archaic Japanese, but there's some old Japanese dude speaking, and even, at the very beginning of me learning Japanese, all the way to now, old Japanese men speaking Japanese just sounds like gibberish a lot of time. Just
なんかさ、なんかそういう、なんて言うんだろうね。ネクストレベルの、リスニングであったり、リーディングっていうのはさ、テストしようがないと思うんだよね。このテストっていうのはさ、なんか、ただ単に、語彙であったり、簡単なっていうか、ベーシックなグラマーであったりっていうのの、なんかセグメントをあなたは理解できていますかっていうのを測るためであって、そういう、なんていうんだろう、もうそういうの全部知ってて、次になんか応用して、
やりたい人にとっては、まあそれはなんていうの、テストしようがないんだよね。なんか、わかる？
Yeah.
その、
For me personally, because I was intending to work in Japan through like a more traditional route, at one point, there were two reasons. It's a longer story for me. For me, I don't even want to get into too much but just because it's a whole story and there's some other stuff I want to cover. But I basically had, personal motivational goals, and I just saw it as a good, challenge. And I also was like, I probably will need this or the N2 or the N1, to do what I wanted to do. So that needed to be done as well. But I guess I want to talk about this for what are the benefits, like practical benefits. So N5 and 4, aside from personal growth, you don't really get any actual practical benefits from doing. N3, we've talked about this before, mentioned it, but with N3, you're able to do a lot of convenience store work or like work in ramen shops or other stuff like that. And so just people, if you're okay, or there's some job that you think would be like customer service that you wouldn't mind doing Japan, that is actually a practical benefit. You can do N3, and you can literally move to Japan, if you're able to get, a job like that. Although it seems like it would be difficult because I don't know how you'd make that contact in the first place. And then N2 is where it, open you up to doing things like CRT position, the coordinator position for the JET program, as well as most general work. And then N1 is just kind of like icing on the cake on top of that. So those are the practical benefits. But like in terms of
さ、あれなんだっけ、日本の永住するのの条件でさ、N1 か N2 とかじゃなかったっけ、あったよね。
Oh yeah. Oh sorry. You also do get the benefit of the highly specialized work visa. You get 15 points if you have the N1, 10 points if you have the N2 towards the 70-point scale towards that.
そういう面に関してはやっぱり持ってて、まあ損はしないっていうか、そういうの必要だからさ、まあなんだよね。まあ義務っちゃ義務だけど。でもなんだろう、なんて言うんだろうね。ツールを使って普段生活したいとか、もっとさらなる高みを目指したい人にとっては、ちょっとなんて言うんだろうね、無駄なテストっていうか、まあ実力を試すのにはいいかもしれないんだけど、これを目指すっていうのもちょっと変わってくるよね。なんていうの、ちょっと意味が違うんじゃないかっていうのも。
For me, I think it was best because I was in school and to be clear, if I wasn't starting Japanese in formalized education setting, and you kind of on a timetable and other stuff, I probably would have never decided to take the JLPT. And to this day, I mean, I haven't really used it for anything, but I'm happy I did it. I am happy I did it, but more so as a goal, more so as a goal than anything. So I do feel it is really weird. And I think most advanced or long-term languages would know this, which is you're never really done learning whatever language you want. Even in English, as I just got done recording, gosh, it was way too long, 5-6 hours of recording for a main channel video. And even when I'm speaking and listening back, I'm I could have improved on that. My pacing could have been better on that. Am I speaking too quickly? Am I not enunciating clearly enough? All these things are still going through my head, even with English, or when I forgot the word for gaming in English for some reason, which I still don't remember the exact. Poor people, maybe, low lives. And those feelings are even stronger, of course, when I'm speaking in another language. So if you're debating on taking the test, if you have a practical reason, I guess what I would say is, even if you don't have a practical reason, create a hypothetical practical reason that you could use it. And then I think then it will serve as a really good motivation. But if you're just trying to do it so you can make some Reddit posts saying that you passed the N1 or whatever, even though you can't hold a conversation in basic Japanese, or you can't even write your name, maybe you don't want to do writing. Maybe writing's not part of your thing. But I'm just saying it's very dubious as to the benefits of that, because if you actually want to use your N1 for something, you're expected to be able to have the abilities across other areas. You know what I'm saying? Which is unlike Japanese and toeic, where for Japanese, if you do the toeic, you're not expected to actually be able to speak English. You know what I'm saying? Sorry, go ahead.
なんて言うとしたんだっけ。普段生活してて、 その人間の関わる上でさ、なんか、リーディングとかライティングとか、まあリスニングは必要だけどね。一番大事なのってなんかスピーキングが気がするんだよ。ね。まあリスニング
Well,
とス
it
ピーキングとか。
depends. I mean, if you're planning to be in the country, right? But like, if you're just trying to watch some anime Japanese, then listening is pretty important.
まあ違うよ。会話する上でさ、人と。
Yeah.
で、なんだろう、そういう、なんて言うんだろう、コミュニケーションっていうのはさ、なんか、実際にいろんな人と話さないとさ、まあ、口語の表現の仕方とかさ、なんていうの、簡単詞っていうの、とかさ、そういうのって、やっぱり実際にやってみないと身につかないし、どういうものがあるのかもわかんないからさ、でもそういうのって絶対テストに出ないじゃん。
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's actually a really good point, especially with the Anki approach. There's an analogy of somebody, it's in computer science. I think it's in computer science. I can't remember where, and now it might be a little dated because AI has gotten kind of crazy good at stuff. But the idea was if you have, is it possible, basically the idea is like, can you just learn like English? Like how much English can you just learn from never actually hearing people use English, but just having the text itself? And so you imagine that you have a robot or a person and you put that person inside a library, with a bunch of English books, but they never encounter anybody in English. And like, how would that person sound speaking English?
それはもうロボットになっちゃうんじゃない？なんか、それこそ、
I guess that's, yeah.
うん。間の取り方とかもわかんないし、あと、さっきも言ったように、なんて言うんだろう。とかさ、とかっていう表現っていうのは絶対辞書にも載ってないじゃん。
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of cultural, like there's so much cultural stuff embedded in that as well. But I definitely feel like the pure Anki approaches definitely lack because of that. But I think a lot of the reasons why, like I said, I've had students who's before where they get like on this like they like feed Anki into their veins and they like try to learn an insane amount. Or they try to add a sane amount or review a sane amount and convince themselves that they are like learning a bunch. And I think I've talked about this podcast before, but all they end up doing is like burning themselves out or being the guy inside the library looking at these books, but never actually engaging with the language. But let us know if you're planning on taking the JLPT at any level, or if you're Japanese or some other person trying to take one of like the English test or another test. I'd be curious to know what your opinion on them. What are the benefits that you see to taking tests? Let us know. 戻りました。
You're back.
今回、あゆみは東北に行きました。感想は何ですか？
Yeah. So, I went to Tohoku this week. It was for 2 days. And so I went to Tohoku with my friend and we spent 2 days and traveling. How many prefectures in Tohoku? Like every prefecture exists in Tohoku.
青森、ちょっと待って、青森、岩手、
福島、山形、宮城、
宮城聞いたことある。秋田はその動詞みたいな。秋田。なんかそのダジャレはよく言われるの。なんか秋田みたいな。
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a typical ダジャレ。So, I'm curious, like, how many prefectures?
私、東北に行ったことない。なんか先生は、一人の先生は、秋田が出身だから。秋田はリンゴで有名なのかな？じゃなかった？
ね、青森。
秋田は何で有名なの？
秋田 is famous for rice. 秋田小町。yeah.
それなんか普通じゃない？それ日本に。それ、
yeah,
どういうこと
like,
だか
秋田 is
日本で。
really famous for that and also 生ハゲ which is like
その変な顔をしてる、鬼。
Yeah. But anyways, so there are 6 prefectures in Tohoku and we went to every single one. So the first day, we went to Fukushima. There's a castle which is 鶴ヶ城 and
鶴ヶ城。行ったことあるかな？
Like, are you talking about you?
なんか上から見てなんか鶴みたい。なんか他の言い方ある？そのなんか白い。全然違う。
会津若松城？
全く知らん。
But yeah, so that one was like pretty far away from the Shinkansen station, which is Koriyama. We spent 1.5 hours, like one way by bus to get there. So it was like 3 hours in total to just to visit that castle. And then after visiting Fukushima, we went to Yamagata, but it was raining and like there was nothing like around the station in Yamagata. So like we visited kind of like a sightseeing, you know, like なんか観光案内所 like information, yeah, kind of stuff like place. And then we taste tested like sake. And we went to Sendai.
あ、仙台知ってる。
was...
仙台はそのロボットあるでしょ、ガンダムの。
I don't
じゃないの？
know. Really? Like where?
いや、わかんない。なんか仙台聞いたことある。仙台は意外と有名なの。
Yeah, it is the most, how do you say, like,
popular.
Civilized? Yeah, popular.
Civilized.
And
なんかバンジーみたいに。
civilized. And also like most Tokai place in Tohoku. And yeah, and then Sendai was pretty close to Tokyo. There were many like tall buildings. There were many people. Also like transportation system was pretty similar to Tokyo. And yeah, we went to Sendaijo, but it's actually how do you say, like Shiroato, which is like there's no castle, but like there's just like
remnants,
like a ruin. Yeah, and then we went to see like a shogun 違う、伊達政宗っていうなんか、
shogun.
Yeah, shogun statue, and it was raining and it was at night and there was no one, so like it was like you know, like kimodameshi, how do you say, like
test of or what's it called, test of courage.
So kind of situation. And we just went there and then stayed at a hotel in Sendai. Yeah, that was the first day. And on the second
それ
day,
1日だけだった。
yeah, so they're pretty much like traveling on the
で
Shinkansen.
結局いつ寝たの？なんか最初の日。
12?
12時で6時から朝の5時、なんか12時5時から12時まで。
At the hotel, we had like hotel morning breakfast like at 6:30, so we had to wake up before that. And yeah, we had breakfast there, and then we took the morning Shinkansen and went to Aomori. Yeah, and then in Aomori there was like a seafood don place. So don is like something on the rice bowl, みたいな. And then at that place you could choose like how do you say, like whatever fish you want on your don. So you just buy like a sheet of 12 tickets for 2,000 yen, and then you pay 1 or 2 tickets to buy fish or like seafood.
なるほど。
So you can make your original kaisen don.
なんか美味しそう。
そう。
なんか美味しい食べ物の話するな。私なんか今食べられないから。
Yeah, after that we went to Nebuta.
ねぶた聞いたことある。
Yeah, Nebuta Museum.
なんかの祭りある？ねぶたは。
Yeah, Nebuta Festival is really famous in Aomori, and it's a festival in summer, like August, I guess. Yeah, and if
like you're interested, yeah, you can search on Google what nebuta is. But like it's basically なんか there's how do you say like a big mikoshi kind of stuff.
The large floats or the Japanese style like floats.
So. And then people dance with it. Basically.
見たことあるの？ねぶた。
No, I haven't. Yeah, I haven't seen the real one. But yeah, we just went to the museum and then saw like and learned history and saw the real nebuta. And that was Aomori. So Aomori is famous for apples. We bought like some souvenirs there. And after that, we went to Akita? Huh. Yeah. Akita. And then since we wanted to like at least step on how do you say like 一歩踏み入れる like at the station like for each prefecture. So we only spent like 1 hour Akita.
秋田すぐ飽きたんだね。
Yeah, 秋田すぐ飽きた。But yeah, that was pretty much like the same. It was pretty similar to Tokyo.
秋田は
like around the station. No, around the station. So like if you really want to experience Tohoku, you have to go deep like into the mountains or like, you know, like onsen places. So like in Tohoku, I guess they are really, really, really similar to Tokyo, like around the station. So if you want to
なんか
visit,
めっちゃ田舎だと思ったんだけど、
Tohoku,
秋田は
you need at least 1 or 2 days for each prefecture so that you can explore.
1時間じゃない。
Like, no. So yeah. But yeah, basically, we just like spent like I don't know, average 2 to 3 hours for each prefecture, and then most of the time we spent on the Shinkansen. So that was pretty hectic. And so what I learned was you need like 1 or 2 weeks to explore Tohoku, like for each prefecture.
And we're back with the final section. And if you made it to the final section, that means you just send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com with a comment, question, language related, and or otherwise. And this week we have 2 comments from 2 new commenters. And the first one is from Tetsuya, who I'm not sure if they're Japanese American or Japanese because they're learning Japanese and their name is very Japanese. But anyways, the comment goes, I just found your YouTube channel. I just found your YouTube and I find it fantastic as someone studying Japanese when Aimi speaks Japanese. Japanese subs would be a huge help. Perhaps the inverse would be helpful for people studying Japanese when Joey speaks. English subs, just a thought. Okay. I think this might be like the 4th or 5th time. I mean, thank you for the email. I'm trying, guys. There's a bunch of different approaches by myself. I've looked into all the resources. If anybody, here's a plea. You know, if you guys can figure out so here's the problem. Because our podcast is in 2 different languages and both speakers switch languages, most approaches just don't work. Whether it be the automated YouTube approach or other like, there's like other AI based approaches that you can do outside of this. Almost none of them work well at all without basically me having to manually do it. So if you can think of a method that is cheaper than I think like $240 something, which is how much it would cost to use like a service to like do it weekly, then we'll get subtitles on the video. I mean, I would love to have it. Like I know that there's people who don't even learn Japanese and they've just said it would be nice if you had like, you know, a translation, but you know, that's a little further way off. So there's the comment there. Aimi, do you have any thoughts on this subtitle issue?
いや、まあ、しょうがない。しょうがないっていうか。でもさ、誰か、なんて言うんだろうね。一番
手っ取り早いのはさ、なんかさ、誰か雇ってさ、なんかそれを一語一句全部さ、スクリプトに書く人がいればさ、まあ一番、まあ簡単っちゃ簡単なのかもしれないけどね。けどそれをさ、週に一回やるっていうね、
That is what you're paying, yeah, for the service. Yeah, you're paying for the. Like I said, there are services like translation services where that's what they're doing. If you were to pay somebody like, yeah, it's expensive. Like for me, when I was doing it, yeah, when I was doing it, it would spend like I was using like a partial approach of like getting like transcripts from two different things, putting them together, and I still basically end up having to manually do the whole thing because there's so many problems, and so it'd take me like 5 to 6 hours of like, you know, work, like checking or I basically had to do it from scratch. So that's just like, yeah, that took way too long and I'm busy and also trying to do main channel stuff. So not feasible at the moment, but yeah. Okay. Next question is from someone who we can't name for reasons that you'll figure out in his comment. Not, we don't want to, but for his own potential safety, it seems. But yeah, new commenter. Also, thank you for the comment, Tetsuya. Please let us know if you have any ideas how to get subtitles on here. I would love to get subtitles on the podcast and transcripts. Okay. Hey guys, thanks for the great episode. I just wanted to answer the questions Joey asked towards the end of the poverty topic. This is a previous episode we had. So here's my take. What does it mean to be poor? Well, as someone who spent most of my life in Syria, we've always lived a life where it meant you barely get by, especially in recent years since the war started in 2010. I left in 2017. As long as you have a roof over your head and can afford to have 3 meals a day, you're considered pretty much rich. And others would be jealous of you, even if you can't send your kids to school, which might seem a bit extreme. But yeah, Syria. I guess what I'm trying to say is that my definition of poor may be overly impacted by how I've been living so far. So I might find those under relative poverty in Japan to be quite wealthy. Seeing as to how you said that they can afford all their expenses in a secure environment and still be able to go out with their friends maybe once a week or so. Do you consider yourself poor? He's responding to that question. Now, I'm staying in Malaysia again since 2017, and as a refugee without any visible rights, please read this anonymously. Yeah, this is what he said. His free speech is not much of a thing. And by that, I mean we're not allowed to work or open banks. They don't provide us any financial support whatsoever. I definitely consider myself to be poor because I still struggle monthly and have to work illegally or find workarounds to get the money for me to get by. So in short, yes, even though I'm in much better state compared to previous years, he still considers himself poor. And Amy, do you want to read the bottom portion, or can you see it? I'm fine with reading as well.
日本語の部分読めばいい？
Yeah.
でも今は日本語を勉強しているし、もちろん独学だけど、もうすぐ仕事を探したいと。マレーシアに日本語を使う仕事の給料は結構高いから、ちょっと希望が近いうちにあるかもしれない。このエピソード、前回のエピソードはちょっと難しかったけど、いい勉強になったからありがとうと。はい、ありがとうございます。
Yeah, thank you so much for the comment. And、do you have any thoughts for me that put, like, you know, I'm always aware of my perspective, you know, the Americans complaining about America can sound like hilarious to someone who's like, yeah, if you can afford food, then you're good. But
やっぱりさ、日本ってさ、すごく恵まれてる国だと思うんだよ。なんかアメリカでもさ、やっぱり、アメリカってすごい、貧富の格差がすごいじゃん。本当にリッチな人はすごくリッチだし、プアな人はもうニューヨークでも、なんか、いろんな、路上で生活してる人も、とか、あと、メトロの中で、物乞いをしている人、ね、ちっちゃい子連れて、チョコとかクッキー、買いますかみたいな言ってる人とか結構いて、なんか、世界の現状を見たっていうのか、っていうのも、勉強になったかな。で、やっぱりなんか日本だと結構、なんだろうね。なんか、屋根がないっていうか、なんていうの、家がないっていうのは、あんまり聞かないし、なんか、ホームレスの人たちでも、屋根はないんだけど、でもなんか、ちょっと集団で橋の下に住んでたりとか、なんかコミュニティがあったりとか、で、
also the weather, it doesn't get that bad in Japan. Just like, you know, if you were homeless in like Siberia or something.
そう。なんか、そうね。あと、エクストリームな、気候がないっていうのもそうね。環境的にはいいのかもしれないし。あと、そうね。なんか、やっぱり生活保護の、制度があって、ある程度お金、必要最低限はもらえるから、なんて言うんだろうね。 まあ今コメントくれた人みたいな、その、poverty っていうのは日本ではあまり見かけないし経験しないかなっていうのは、まあ事実だね。で、
I will say I don't think I've ever even heard Japanese people complain about, like, other than when they're explicitly asked, like on an interview about you consider poor or whatever, but I've really never hear Japanese people complain. Maybe it might be a cultural thing and they're actually thinking it but not saying it, but I really don't hear anybody complain about, I rarely hear it talks about money at all, if I'm being honest. But you know, you talk to, maybe it might be a cultural thing, but like, you know.
いや、マニーは喋らないよ。
Yeah, I was going to say, because every American you'll hear be like, this is expensive, this is too expensive, housing's too expensive, food's too expensive, this, you know, whatever. Like, this is like a joke that the comedian Louis Spears made, so I'm not stealing this joke, about the US was we have these like videos on YouTube. They're not as popular now, but where basically a YouTuber would go and give a homeless person money, and that'd be content. And he's like, the US is the only place in the world where you can make content like this because there's no inequality like that in the rest of the world, where you can go somebody who's so incredibly wealthy. Well, the person who's so incredibly wealthy, where, you know, you can Mr. Beast buy 40 cars in the same place where you have a guy begging for McDonald's fries in the subway. You know what I'm saying?
でも日本でもあれだよ、なんかホームレスにお金をあげてなんか何を買うかみたいななんか密着の YouTube とかもまああるよ。
Maybe I'm not sure if you heard the difference in my examples, but yeah, there are some. It's not. I mean, for one, yeah, buying someone's food, great. But I'm saying the American equivalents are like, I give you 10 grand, you know, or drop, you know. So they're, yeah, and also to be clear, the trend starting is an American thing. I think I've noticed a lot of Japanese YouTube has been purely in a box for a very long time, but recently they've started, like, you know, following trends from like 10 years ago in America. So I feel like Japan, you know, there's like YouTubers who I think are just straight up copying, like there's a very famous series called Jubilee in like American like YouTube, but I feel like a lot of series that and like trends in America, you just have to wait 3-4 years and then a Japanese person ends up picking up on it finally. So the originality of basically poverty exploitation is Americans. But it, yeah. Have you ever known anybody? I mean, obviously don't say their name, but who's like living or working illegally in Japan? Because I'll tell you, in the U.S. is something that's fairly common.
いや、なんかそもそも日本ってさ、そういう難民の人たちを受け入れてないじゃん。なんか、受け入れてんのか。でもそういう、なんて言うんだろう。あんまり、ウクライナは受け入れてんのかな。なんか、でもまあ、なかなかそういう移民とか、そういう系は本当になんかコンサバティブみたいな感じで、だから周りでそんないないっちゃいないのかな。からあまり私は個人的な、まあ、経験っていうのはないんだけど、でもやっぱり、なんだろう、外国人が多い、まあ、ちょっと地域があるんだけど、そういうところの人たちは、外国人が来たせいで、なんか、なんだ、騒動が起きたり、治安が悪くなったり、あと、なんだろう、ちょっと、なんか、一回、なんか外国人が、なんか駅前でなんか暴動を起こしたのかな？で、それに対して、なんかそこに住んでる人たちが、なんか、外国人のせいでこんな治安悪くなったんだ、みたいな。それでまた喧嘩になって、みたいな。なんか警察が出る騒動になったっていうのも結構聞くから、やっぱり、まあ、アベレージの人からすると、あんまり積極的じゃないのかなっていう印象は受けるね。
I definitely will say that I think there's a chance it's going to get more and more everything in Japan, not because I think immigrants, whatever, are a problem. And like I said, I'm not sure if you knew this, but in the U.S., like basically almost all the immigrants, including like illegal immigrants, are less, like they commit crime less often and basically just cause less problems and just more benefits to the U.S. than anything. But the thing is, in the U.S., you have even more like cultural, you know, a mixed population. So there's at least some pushback on one side of the aisle. You know, the left side were just, you know, well, to some degree. I don't think that's really, I think it's more bipartisan, people kind of not allowing immigrants in. But in Japan, I think when this is going to become more and more pressing, when Japan needs more people, the problem is that there isn't this cultural diversity. So I feel like there's going to like the laws or government's going to immediately push back on, you know, anybody who's not Japanese ends up committing a crime, even if the percentage is lower than Japanese people, hypothetically, people are just going to be like, Japan's gone to shit because, you know, you're accepting Americans or something. And yeah, so I would not be surprised if we start hearing conversations like that. Yeah, because right now I think most people in Japan are like highly skilled labor, but Japan's going to need way more than just that. And even within that, it's very, very, very difficult to get in with having basically a PhD. But yeah, thanks for the perspective. I definitely, appreciate, although I think the US is bad at a lot of stuff, given that it's number one, I definitely am privileged in many different ways. So yeah, appreciate it a lot. That bell means we've reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us in another lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and are just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com. We might respond in the next episode. Also, consider supporting us on Ko-Fi to get video updates, Discord access, and or to just lend a hand. And finally, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey.
And Ayami.
Signing off. Ja ne.